Hello, everyone. Welcome to season 2, episode 13 of my LinkedIn live series. Today, we'll be talking about communication for your career growth. And I'm joined today by Madeline Schwarz. She's a communication coach, a workshop facilitator, and a public speaker as well. How are you doing today, Madeline?
I'm great. Hi, Stephen.
How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. Can you hear me?
Yes. I think StreamYard glitched a little bit right there, like the whole video froze, but I believe we are live right now. So.
All right. Well, we'll just run with the technology glitches.
So, how are you doing today, Madeline?
I am doing well. So excited to be here and chat with you.
Yeah, likewise. And I think our topic today resonates with a lot of different people. We'll talk about why communication is so important for your career growth. You need to be able to communicate in any job that you're in. And we'll share some tips about how to get better at communication, both as a giver and as a receiver as well. But before we get into our topic, Madeline, do you want to introduce yourself?
Certainly. So what I love about what I do is that I get to help people tell stories and I get to help teams communicate more effectively and be more creative at work. And I have been telling stories my entire career, but in very different formats. I started as a book publicist at a design book publisher where I place stories about authors and books in national media. And from there, I then got into display and exhibit design. And I spent more than a decade designing window displays, experiential marketing events, and retail environments for companies like Nike and Adidas and Coach and Diesel. And it was really in that experience that I discovered the importance of being able to get a message across in seconds. And what I also discovered from so long working with creative teams is that the people who are really great at the creative part of their jobs aren't always great at being able to explain their ideas and sell them into other people. And that's what I focus on now, is helping people tell those stories, build the narrative, and articulate their vision so that they can share their amazing work with other people.
Yeah, I had come from an engineering background, so I can say the same thing as well. There are engineers who are very, very smart, very, very creative, come up with such innovative solutions, but they are not so good at explaining it. Especially, we'll talk about this in a little bit as well. People at work speak different languages, and not just like Spanish or English, but like there's different ways that they understand things. So as an engineer, you have to be able to explain things to upper management to make to fit what their goals are, right? To fit what their needs are. You can't just talk to them as if they're an engineer because they don't understand the technical aspect.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I work on with people, is being able to translate their ideas for the audience so that they know how to tailor the message and make it relevant to the people that they're talking to. Because just as you said, it's very different how you need to explain things to senior level leaders versus other creative staff or other engineers.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So we'll talk more about that, but let's start with our first topic here. Why is communication essential for career growth?
So communication is one of the top rated skills in job listings. It comes up high in the list of skills needed for the future of work. And regardless of changing industries, changing job descriptions, even with AI, like there's really a lot of research that shows that communication is still an essential skill. And it's the basis of every relationship in business, the relationships that you have with your colleagues, the other people that you work with, but also the relationships that you have with customers and clients and stakeholders.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you have to be able to communicate with, like you said, all these different stakeholders. They have an interest in the project you're working on or whatever you're working on, and being able to communicate with them. And again, we talked about this earlier. They all speak different languages. Being able to communicate with them on the status of things you're working on, the challenges you have, and just having that clear and consistent and constant communication really helps build that working relationship. Really helps make that bond and that connection a lot stronger as well.
And also being able to articulate the value of what you're working on and the value of what you bring to the table. And I don't know if you found this in the engineering world, but in the creative world, I think often people think that the creative work speaks for itself, and it doesn't. We need to be able to articulate the ideas and explain the strategy behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in so many presentations where someone has a PowerPoint and they feel like it's self-explanatory, but I mean, you have so much information on there. You have so many words, you have so many graphs and charts and things like that. It's like, where do you want me to look? What's what's your focus? What's your bottom line? And being able to, that's just a more visual type of communication. But even through email, even through a phone call, being able to say up front, this is the main point I want to make, or this is where I need help. Putting that value up front directly really saves time in communication rather than going through a half-hour meeting and you realize, wait, what was the point of this meeting?
Yeah, and using those slides or the graphs or the data to explain your point and add to what you're saying, as opposed to use it as a substitute for being able to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. So, we talk about why communication is so important. Let's move on to the how part of it. How do you get better at your communication skills? And I know this is a very broad topic, but Madeline, I'll let you talk about it first, and we'll see where this takes us.
The biggest thing is you need to practice. So it's just like baseball or knitting. Like those are not things that you're going to learn from watching YouTube videos and sitting on the couch. Like you need to actually get some yarn and some knitting needles if you want to knit a sweater. And if you want to learn how to play baseball, you got to get out on the field and take some swings. So finding ways to practice is key in building your skills. And while books can be helpful, like it's really a skill that you need to cultivate through practice and being willing to be bad at it first. Like if you think of all the other things that you have picked up in your life, whether it's a sport, whether it's an instrument, whether it's cooking, you've probably had some mess ups along the way. And it's the same with communication.
Yep, exactly. I get this question a lot. Right? How do I get better at public speaking? I'm a shy introvert. You just got to practice. And especially for those who are students, I tell them, go find opportunities to practice. You have no risk at all. You're not presenting to upper management. You're not trying to get funding for a project. You're just speaking about what you're working on, right? To your classmates, to your professor. There's really no risk in that. So I agree with you, Madeline. Absolutely, you have to practice. And another thing I want to add on to that is get feedback, especially when you're in that more of that safe space area. You have from coworkers, you have some allies or supporters in the room. Ask them for feedback. How did my presentation go? What can I do better? And that's how you get better. Like it's a skill, right? With baseball, knitting, with the examples you shared, it's a skill, and you just got to practice to get better.
Yeah, and for people who are working professionals and are maybe a little bit timid about practicing at work because it can feel really high stakes, is I always encourage people to find places to practice outside of work. So if you volunteer, give presentations there, go to a city council meeting, talk about something that matters to you in your neighborhood, take an improv class, sign up for Toastmasters, work with a coach. Like there's so many ways to practice, but you want to go through your material and hone those skills before you're in the high pressure settings, because then you can bring them back to work.
Yep, exactly. And then, being able to present well, being able to present effectively, being able to communicate well, these are the most important skills that you need in the workplace. And, as we said, you just have to practice. Find those low stress, low impact situations outside of work where you can actually practice, and that's how you get better at these different skills here. Let's talk a little bit about how do you be a little more effective at presenting. So, okay, you built up the confidence in public speaking. Now, how do you convince someone of your message or of your strategy or something you want to implement? How can you be more effective at presenting?
So I like to think of presentations kind of like jigsaw puzzles. And if you are doing 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and you dump out all of the pieces onto the table and you just start willy-nilly with like one color, which is exactly what my 6-year-old did, like the first time when he was 6, when we did our first big puzzle, it's a mess, right? You just have all these details spread out all over the table and you have no direction. So I taught him my puzzle strategy, and it's the same with presentations. First, you want to work on the border. So when you have 1,000 pieces, you sort out all of the flat pieces and you find the edges and you find the corners. And that's what it's like, what it's like when you're putting together a presentation. You want to figure out what it is that you want to get across and make that the border. And then once you have that, then you can start sorting through colors and details. And that's kind of like your outline for our presentation. So you're starting with, the big framework, then you're narrowing it down to your outline. And then once you have done steps 1 and 2, then you start filling in all of the details and the stories and the data and maybe a graph or chart if that's relevant, but only because you have first built a frame and a foundation for the rest of the information.
Yeah, sorry about the disconnect there, but I really like your analogy about the puzzle, right? And just like any presentation, you can't just start digging into the details. You got to build that framework, and the framework is not not quite the outline of your presentation, but what's the message you want to put across, right? Build that message first, and then build your slides around it. Build those, the topic slides, and start putting in all the little details there. So yeah, I really like that analogy with presenting, and I think same thing here is with what I said earlier. Get that feedback, right? You go through a presentation. Hey, was my message clear, right? Were you able to understand what my goal or what I was trying to get the audience to do here? And you get that feedback, and that's how you improve in your public speaking and your presentation skills as well.
Yes, I agree. And it goes back to something that you talked about earlier is the PowerPoint decks that are packed with too much information. What I do when I'm working with clients is, they want to show me their PowerPoint deck in the presentation. I'm like, no. Before you even open that, let's talk about the message. Like, what is it that you want your audience to remember at the end? And I make them come up with one sentence. Because if you can articulate your message and what you want the audience to leave with in one sentence, it's so much clearer what details to put into the presentation. And so then you can just save tons of time and energy, because instead of fiddling with a slide deck and fonts and colors and pictures, you are starting with the main point and then building the information from there. Yep.
I like that. Yeah, it's just get that. What's that message, right? That one sentence. It doesn't have to be a paragraph. Just keep it simple. One sentence. What's that major takeaway there? We got a comment here saying, oftentimes people discuss topics outside of meeting scope, most likely because that metaphorical border is not clearly defined. What are your thoughts on that, Madeline?
Yeah, and I think that happens a lot because people don't set up their meetings for success by letting people know at the beginning of the meeting what the objective is for the meeting. And so, for instance, with creative clients, I always tell people when you're starting off a meeting with a client, you're going to review creative work, tell them what the objective is. Like, your objective is probably not to leave the meeting with 13 more revisions to do. Your objective is for them to make a decision and leave with one clear direction. And so you want to tell them that at the beginning so that everyone knows why you're in the room and what you're meant to do in that time. And then if things go off topic, you can direct people back to the purpose of this meeting. And that can really help move things along so that you don't get sidetracked and you can have more of the essential conversation in the meeting.
Yeah. And that's how you run effective meetings. Have that clear agenda up front. Stay on topic, because if there's no agenda, people will talk as long as they can until there's 5 minutes left in the meeting. You try to cram everything back in, and you realize you need a second meeting, and it's just an endless cycle there. So, Madeline, I know you, as a communication coach, you have these different frameworks in place, and you mentioned that you have this comms framework. Do you want to mention what that is and what it stands for?
Yeah. So comms stands for 5 skills that are essential for effective communication. They are curiosity, asking questions, listening, mindset, and stories. And the framework starts with curiosity, because curiosity is such a magical tool to get you out of anxiety and into wonder. It's a great skill to develop at work with the people that you work with. It helps creativity. It helps with collaboration. And it also informs the quality of the questions that you ask, which is how we get into the second skill, which is asking questions. And I always remind people, communication is two-part. Like, we've been talking a lot about presentation skills, and that involves a lot of speaking, but even when you're presenting, you still want to be listening to your audience. And you can do that by doing research ahead of time. You can do that by making your presentations more interactive while you're speaking and listening. But that's how you can change an experience from you talking at people to really interacting and working together to solve problems. And that leads us into the third skill, which is listening. And as a culture, we're not very good at listening. And so I have developed this concept called listening with all your senses as a way to help people tap into deeper listening and make sure they're not leaving a lot of meaning on the table when they are jumping in too quickly, talking over people, and really not paying attention, which is when you can miss those crucial details from your teammates or your clients, like the exact details that give you the information that you need to say the things you need to say and answer their questions to move projects forward. And then mindset is so important in communication and a big part of what I work on with people, because just as you need to practice the words that you are going to say when you are giving a presentation or explaining your ideas, you also need to practice the thoughts that you want to be thinking about what you're presenting, how valuable it is, and what you're thinking about the people that you're presenting to. Otherwise, you can have an incredibly polished presentation and it can still flop because you're thinking this is boring or these people don't want to hear from me. So it's just as important to practice mindset techniques as it is to practice the actual speaking skills. And then the final skill is stories, because stories are such a powerful way to make your work relevant and accessible to other people and to connect the vision of the company to the employees. So those skills together make the comms framework, which helps people calm their nerves and communicate with ease.
I like when all these coaches like you come up with a easy to remember acronym to discuss their framework as well. So really like that. I just want to touch on a couple points you made for listening. That is a skill that is very underrated but very, very necessary, and it's a skill that all of us need to work on. We hear the term a lot about active listening. So don't just listen, just don't listen passively, right? To be actively listening. Don't just jump to having a response right away in the first couple seconds that someone's speaking. Think about their whole message, right? What are they trying to tell you? And then come up with a response rather than trying to cut in and interject them to do that. And then the final one, the S, stories. That's how people connect with others, right? We connect with people, we connect with stories. Stories help make us a lot more personable, a lot more relatable as well. So I really like what you said about having the stories, right? Even if you're a company, tie it in with the people, tie it in with your clients, with your customers, tie it with their pain points, right? With their struggles and how you can help solve them. And that really makes your message a lot more stronger and a lot more effective.
Yeah. And stories make the human brain 20%, or actually it's more than 20%. I think it's 22% more likely to remember something than a fact alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then let's now go to our final topic here. And I get this question a lot. I want to get your thoughts. A lot of my ideal clients are shy introverts. They have trouble speaking up in meetings. So how do you speak up in work settings? A lot of people just worry about, I have nothing to contribute, or I'm going to be wrong and get judged. How do you build up that confidence to speak up in work settings?
Yeah, I think there are three really important things to focus on. But first, I want to highlight one of the things that introverts are already really good at normally, which is listening. And given that is 50% of communication, really lean on your strengths when you're starting out. But the three things that I think are important for speaking up at work are, one, having a really clear message. And this is where preparing in advance can be helpful. And so when you are able to articulate your message in one sentence, that is really helpful. But make sure you do that out loud before you go into the meeting. I think often people might breeze through their deck and kind of in their head go through what they want to say, or just read what they have written on their slides in their head before they step into the meeting. And it's so crucial to practice out loud. I could not stress enough how much that is going to help you if you are nervous, anxious, shy. Finding the words ahead of time, being able to paraphrase the words, try it out in a few different ways is going to really help you. Then the second thing is to work on your delivery, to really think through ways to make your delivery more engaging and interactive for the people that you are presenting to. And I always tell people, like, even if you're the one at the front of the room, that doesn't mean that you have to do all of the work. And if you think about it more as a conversation and make it a more conversational experience, that can often take the edge off a bit for people who are a bit more nervous or anxious. And then the third thing is the mindset. So really being purposeful and practicing new thoughts that you want to think about communication. And so, if you're nervous that people are staring at you, let's say when you're presenting to a big conference room of people, you can reframe that as they're paying attention. They are waiting to hear from you. Or if you're worried that your content is going to be boring or dry, something I hear from a lot of people I work with, especially the attorneys, really focusing on the value that you have and just saying, like, okay, I have value to offer these people, because you can have a lot of value to offer people and you don't need to present it perfectly to share that value.
Yeah. Oh, I like those three tips. And I think, it comes down to practicing, right? And again, we talk about that. That's how you get better at any skill. You got to practice, get that feedback. And then the last thing you said was having that mindset, right? We tend to be our own toughest critics. We tend to look at the negative side of things. But that example you said that, people are staring at me. It's like, no, they want to learn from you, right? You are the expert. You're the person up front presenting the material. And if you have your message clear up front, and it solves their pain points or solves their challenges, they will pay attention to you. They will have their main focus on you. And that's how you can get your point across as well. So I really like that mindset, just having to change it to more of a positive view rather than a negative view. That really makes a huge difference.
Right. And if you can't get to positive right away, get to neutral. Mm-hmm. So for instance, I was prepping someone who was giving a presentation to executives at their company, and she was really caught up in the titles of those people. And when we broke it down, she thought more about the topic that she was going to be talking about and realized, okay, I'm having a conversation about this topic that I am really passionate about. And so when she reframed it from a big, scary presentation with a capital P to a conversation with some other human beings, it can seem a lot less scary.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, right? You don't worry too much about the title. Know your audience. So yes, maybe they're all executives or they're all engineers or whatever, but know your audience. But at the end of the day, they're people too. They're human. They're just like you, right? So that's how you treat the conversation. They're not scary, giant demons or something, right? They're just people as well. And just that, I think that would help change your mindset and calm your nerves as well. So as we wrap up here, we talked a lot about why communication is so important. We talked about how to improve your communication skills, practicing, getting that feedback, finding those low stress situations to do that, how to be more effective, get that clear message up front. Madeline, you introduced your comms framework, right? A lot of it was talking about having the curiosity, asking questions, listening, mindset, and storytelling. Did I get that right?
You did. Great job.
And then finally, how to speak up in work settings, right? Just having that correct mindset to that. So I want to, thank you so much for your time, Madeline. I want to give you the last couple minutes here to make your plug, right? How can you help others? What do you need help with, or what do you have upcoming? This is your LinkedIn profile right here, Madeline-Schwarz-Coach on LinkedIn. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, for anyone who needs help being more clear and concise, grab my free resource, Get Clear on Your Message. So this is 4 easy steps that you can use to prep for any presentation, meeting, interview, networking event, and it works whether you have 5 hours or 5 minutes.
Great. And where can we find that? Is that on your LinkedIn profile or is it on your website?
So that is on my website, MadelineSchwartzCoaching.com/get-clear.
Great. So I better go check that out as well, right? Communication is a skill, right? You can't ever be perfect at a skill, but you can always get better. You can always improve. So I'll make sure to check that out as well, improve my own communication skills. But yeah, as we wrap up here, any final thoughts, any final closing words do you have, Madeline?
That for people who are just getting started, I just want to assure you that this is something that can change. You might be thinking today, like, this is scary. I'm never going to be good at this. But just as we have talked about today, like, there are lots of things that you probably weren't good at in your life. Sports, instruments, walking, right? At one point, none of us knew how to walk, and we have all learned that through trial and error. So don't be discouraged. Like, go practice, get feedback, but also find places to get safe feedback, right? Where you're going to be in an encouraging environment. And so, for me, like, I've taken improv classes, and while that was once my worst nightmare, it actually was an incredibly fun experience where everyone gets to be goofy and silly together. And it's a great way to build your skills.
Absolutely. To get better at anything, to grow in your career or in your life and your goals or whatever, you have to get out of your comfort zone. And I really like that improv idea. And it's something, it's fun and harmless, right? We all laugh at each other, right? No one's perfect. Everyone's there trying to get better at communication and solve for fun. So yeah, thank you so much, Madeline. We talked a lot about communication for your career growth. It's so important for your career, but the steps to get better at it isn't that complicated, right? Practice, have that right mindset, get feedback, and that's how you get better as well. So thank you, everyone, for watching, for listening in, especially if you're watching on the replay as well. Leave a comment. And thank you, Madeline, for your time here. I learned a lot from you as well, especially with your comms framework. And people, make sure to go to Madeline's website. Go get that free resource to get better at communication. Have a great week, everyone, and talk to you all soon.